Middara is an ambitious fantasy game in this recent tradition or style that we have seen in the last couple of years of worlds in a box. That is, massive games that come with a lot of scenarios and components that will allow you to create a vast, expansive story world that you can inhabit for a long time. You can explore through so many scenarios. Medora comes with a scenario book, which is hundreds of pages, so pretty impressive. The box is there in the background. I'm not gonna hold it to the camera because I don't want to throw my back, but if you want to see the cover, you can just look for an image online. There are many that you can find easily. So Middara is a cooperative game, can be played by 1 to 4 players, I guess even more if you have more players controlling a party of heroes. So you have more players than heroes, I guess it can still be played, but ideally you're gonna have up to 4 players controlling a party of 4 heroes. Again, you can play solo if you control them all. And these 4 heroes will do different things. It can be played in a crawl mode, so more like a traditional dungeon crawl. It can also be played in adventure mode, in which case you're really exploring the fantasy world that is created through the interlinking of the scenarios, as one scenario leads to another. Game book, in a game book style. I'm not gonna tell you much more than this about the world of the game because, well, I don't want to give any spoiler in case you decide to play the adventure mode and you want to discover for yourself what that is. I guess I can tell about the first scenario because that's, I don't know, that counts as a spoiler. That's where you start anyways. Your heroes have been trained but untested, and now pretty much they're graduating as heroes, and so they had to go through a test in which they had to show, well, that they can do the stuff that adventurers do. I hope that's not too much of a spoiler. But without further ado, let me show you how the game looks and works. Looks, yes, it's important because this is a game where production matters. Miniatures are probably a big draw for many people considering whether or not to buy this game, so let's start by taking a look at the miniatures here. They are in hard plastic, they come unpainted, but they are different enough from one another that really you don't need to paint them to be able to play the game, to differentiate them. We have the heroes, especially as they look like at the beginning of the campaign, that is with the equipment that you find on them. And then we have an endless, or to say in any case, vast assortment of different monsters and characters that will interact with the players in a variety of ways. These are really nice miniatures, really high quality, especially when it comes to the centerpieces, that is these large miniatures. This is the bad guy that you find also on the cover. Reminds me of a Tolkien evil Spirit of the Ring. Very detailed, very nice miniatures, very high quality. To me, miniatures are not the main draw while I'm interested in a game, but they can be a really nice bonus to have. Look at just at the level of creativity and detail. Oh, hello, what are you doing on top of that big scary thing? And then we have these two. The tentacle monster, because a game can never have too many tentacles, and the evil tree of evil and doom. This is my own interpretation. Players will control characters such as this one that are represented by a miniature that goes on the board, of course, and then we have a main card that shows us a portrait of the character and the basic stats. Then you will add more cards around it to customize your character further. Here we have the number of dots that you see here, regardless of color, is the maximum number of stamina points the character can have. Think of these stamina points as action points. That's really what they are. During your turn, you will take actions and you will spend stamina points. Say, I take an action that costs 1 stamina point, then I take another one that takes 2, and so on and so forth until maybe I have none or I decide to save some. The number of red dots is the number of stamina points that you will get back, that you will regenerate at the beginning of the next turn. So there are some interesting tactical decisions that you may push with a lot of action now, and then next turn you'll have a shorter turn, or budget things differently. Also, these tokens here that you see don't come with the game. I've added them because I like them to keep track of stamina points. Then we may have special actions. For example, a movement action usually costs a single movement action point, stamina point, but you're walking, but Remy can fly. So by spending 2 stamina points, she can move by flying. Here we have the number and type of dice that you roll when you're resisting effects. This is the number and type of dice that you roll when you are casting spells. We'll more about that later. Stats, these are the bonuses that you will add to your die roll when you're trying to pass a test in one of these abilities. Maybe you have to take an agility test, difficulty 12. Then you roll dice, you add, in this case, 6, and you see if you equal or exceed the target number for that skill check, you pass, otherwise you fail. Then we have health. I think you imagine that when that stat goes down to 0, the character is defeated. And in the game, usually you lose the game when all of your characters are defeated, and you win if you meet the victory conditions of the scenario. Defense is your protection, is the number that the attacker is trying to meet or exceed in order to inflict a hit on you. And movement is the number of spaces that you can move when you take the move action. But we said that you can customize your characters, and oh yeah, you can. You have many decks of items, and they're divided by levels. Say these are the mundane consumables, core items, accessories, relics, weapons, etc, etc, etc. And then we have similar decks for higher end items, such as the uncommon items. Then we have, well, the common items, the rare items. Just to give a sense of how many decks we have, it's really a lot. The variety of things that you can acquire, discover, buy, trade, sell is staggering, so really good. And suppose that when all is said and done, we are equipping our Remy here with a plank. Don't laugh at the plank, it's a very valuable item. We better give her a sword also, a weapon. And then the magic bra that will give her magic protection. And then we have a core and some balm and some bottle blessings. You know, I know when you want to take a sip of a blessing after all. Then we have other cards representing abilities, and again the number of ability cards is huge, and that means that by giving different abilities to your character, different combinations, you'll have completely different characters that are better at subterfuge rather than martial arts, or maybe they're really good with certain types of magic or protective abilities, etc, etc. These abilities are divided by type. Each type is then divided by level, and in classic role-playing game fashion, there's a number of experience points that you need to spend to buy that ability, and then when you have it, you place it on your card or buy your card, etc, etc. And of course, the higher the level, the more powerful it is. And suppose that she has this ability here. It's not bad. The status is, well, heal, but the effect cannot stack. Or say during your dodge roll, then you have an advantage to dodge, and so on and so forth. So let's leave them here again to give you a sense. Next, we have to talk about, well, the main game itself. The game is divided in scenarios. So there's a huge book of scenarios that works like a game book. Basically, you start reading instructions of a scenario, and then you reach a situation in which you will play the situation out on the board, and then you follow the instructions of the scenario, setting the scenario up by using these terrain tiles. Again, huge stack, a lot of material value that you get with this game. Which of course is not just for the material value per se, is the narrative potential, how many things you can do with so many terrain tiles that are great looking, by the way, and also double-sided. So lots of different scenarios, from cold-looking dungeons to forests to all sorts of situations. There are enough terrain tiles here to really create a world, a whole world. You got a world in a box. And suppose I'm making up a scenario, this way I don't give you any spoilers. Suppose the scenario now tells us that this is the place in which we are. This is the place in which we are. Yeah, it's a very small scenario. This is the place in which we are. We are told where we are starting, and say Remy starts here, and her pals start here. I'm using these tokens instead of miniatures now, so you see better. This scenario also tells us that there's a monster called the Animate, and the Animate starts here. And we'll have a card later, we'll look at it, that determines what the Animate does. Also, when we set up a scenario, there's even further customization when it comes to the landscape, because there are terrain tiles. Maybe there are more terrains that are impassable. Red lines mean impassable. Maybe there's water somewhere, and so on and so forth. So on top of that, of the fact that there are a lot of terrain tiles, you can do a lot with those. Here, these white lines, pretty much think of them as a big hole. If you fall in there, you're dead. That is, these spaces don't block line of sight, but if you end your turn on one of those, you're dead. The red lines are impassable obstructions, so they block line of sight and you can move in them. You can move in the water, but there are movement penalties and also combat penalties. Now, how do we resolve a turn? By using initiative cards. Each hero has an initiative card, and also each type of monster that's on the board gets an initiative card. So we shuffle this deck and pretty much we form an initiative line. So when we activate, when we play the game, the miniatures on the board will activate in the order in which you see them here, from left to right. And then when we get to the end of the activation of the rightmost character, that round is over and you move back here and you start another round. Where are the odds? Now we have just Remy and the Animated moving. So when it is the character's turn, the player controlling the character will, as we said, spend stamina points. Suppose that Remy wants to attack that guy, and then she spends a point to move, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you can only move orthogonally, and she's right there, and then she wants to spend 2 stamina points to attack the guy. I didn't mention the dice. These are really cool dice. As you can see, they're color-coded, and there's a lot going on them. They do different things. They have different ranges of numbers and different sets of symbols on them. That is, some are better doing some things and some better doing other things. Usually when you roll, you want to have high numbers, and you also want to have a ton of symbols so that you can activate effects, because a lot of skills and a lot of items have special effects. Say, when I'm attacking, I'm looking at the numbers to see if I hit or not and how many points of damage I generate, but then also if I have 2 shields in the dice that I rolled, good for me, because then I can generate an extra 2 points of damage, and if there is a star, even more so. And suppose that this is the case. For example, I have now I've attacked with the long sword, that in fact gives me 2 dice, and I have a total of 12 in my attack, and if I hit, these 2 shields will give me 2 extra damage, and the star will give 1 extra damage. So it's a general idea that things will generate different, will use different pools of dice, and that's neat. Now, when you attack, yes, you look at all of the abilities that you have, the items that you have, to put together a pool of dice. There are cases in which you can empower your roll, so you will add the black die. If you are the attacker, you may also choose to dodge. That will increase your defense, and if you're able to dodge, you roll this die and simply you add all shields to your defense. If I have a defense of 9, I am the target of an attack, I choose to dodge, I use this die, I roll this, now my defense of 9 is a defense of 11, because I have +2. So I put together all the dice that I can possibly put together, I roll, and I'm trying to roll equal to or higher than the defense of the opponent. I rolled 11, the defense of the opponent, if no other modifiers apply, is 9. So if I equal or exceed that number, I score a hit. Hooray! What happens now is that I calculate the difference between my attack and the defense. 11 minus 2 minus 9 is 2, so I had 2 points of damage. To that is sort of like the basic damage. Again, I add extra damage that may come from symbols or from whatever other abilities. Which is why, if you just match the defense of the opponent, although the difference between your attack and the defense is 0, you may still score damage thanks to the symbols. And once you determine how many points of damage you cause to that, you put damage tokens on that part. Why on that side of the card? Because right now there's only one animate. Suppose that there were 2, then we color code them by using the bases. So there is this one that is here, and there is another one that is the purple one. So I attack that one, and so I put the damage for that one here. So I know that is the one that took the damage. When the animate or whatever target receives enough damage to go down to 0 health, the target is defeated. The monsters attack pretty much in the same way, but when it is the monster's turn to attack, then you look at the card and simply you implement the AI. If you play games like the Dungeons & Dragons board games, so then you know how these AIs work. Start from the top to take into account standing effects, passive effects, and then simply resolve the AI like a branch of options, like a branching tree of options starting from the top and going down. Does the animate have damage? Yes. Heal 2. Dang it. Then I remove 2 damages. Next, is there opponent adjacent? Oh yes, there is. Our param is there. Then the monster makes an attack, and we do that. We simply take the dice that are indicated here for that attack, roll them, and we resolve the same thing. Remember, I could have chosen maybe to dodge, stuff like that. But 5 against a defense of 9, that's a miss. If instead that was a hit, the same idea. The difference between the attack and my defense is the base damage to which we apply possible modifiers. And this is the basic idea, but there's a lot of other stuff that can go on, as for example, you can use items during combat. If I'm here exhausting the magic bra, and exhausting, you turn it this way, you tap it pretty much, you get the dodge ability, and if the attack of the opponent does no damage, I can unexhaust it and counter it. Countering again is something you can do under certain circumstances when the opponent misses you, and then you simply get a free attack against them. Whoa, Remy, you're killing it today. Good for you. Skills work in similar ways. Again, when you're taking a skill check, you roll 2 purple dice, apply the modifier based on your ability, and you do that when you're casting a spell. Then you roll the dice that you have on your card for your character, add the power of the spell that indicates the total force of the spell, and then the opponent rolls conviction dice, so that is, they roll their conviction ability to try to resist the spell. This is the general idea. I keep it vague. I really try to just pay attention to the main concepts, because the manual is over 70 pages. There's no way we're going to cover all of the cases. And discovering all the cases, of course, is part of the fun. But generally speaking, these are the general ideas at the core of Middara. You explore this world, scenario after scenario. At the end of a scenario, you will know if you, depending on whether you were defeated or successful, different things will happen, different scenarios will be unlocked, you'll be directed to different places. As the scenario progresses, actually, important concept I was forgetting. Many scenarios will have exits, and your job is to simply reach the exit. Then we may have loot tokens that are placed on the board based on the scenario instructions. And when a character is adjacent to them, then you look at the playbook, at the scenario instructions, and they will tell you what is there, what that corresponds to. Then we have totems that are special events, circumstances, you don't know what they are, but when a character has a line of sight to one of them, again, you check the rulebook and it tells you what is there, so that surprises will spring on you. There will be things that happen you didn't expect throughout the game. The scenario will feel very vivid and exciting, also precisely because there's stuff that happens that you did not expect at the beginning. Middara is a hybrid between a role-playing game and a board game. It is a board game at its core in the sense that it does not require a master, a narrator. There are no ambiguities. You don't have somebody that works behind the screen and rolls dice and then ignores the rolls of the dice to tell you a better story. Says, oh, I rolled a 20. This amazing thing happens. Everything is tightly contained within the rules of the game, which is what distinguishes role-playing games proper from board games. At the same time, while you have the narrative span, you have the detail, you have the interesting deep characters, you have the interconnected scenarios that you have from role-playing games. Other things that come from the meeting of the two worlds, when you play a role-playing game, usually you're not scared by a 150, 200-page manual, or maybe you are, because unless you are the game master, you usually don't have to digest that much content. You're told the rules by the master that did the work beforehand. You're given your character sheet, and then you can kind of like go. With Middara, you have a 75 page rule book, which is pretty daunting, and the fact is that, well, every player has to know what those rules are. Now, a lot of those are self-explanatory. A lot of those are, if you see that effect, do what it says. If you see that card, do what the text says, which is fine. You need that. In a board game, you need to also state the obvious. I would say that maybe there are like 10, 15 pages, which really are hard rules and detailed procedures, such as, say, combat, spell casting, spell-like abilities. Those are non-negotiable. You need to know them very well. Some of the other rules you can go and then figure them out. And some of those rules you don't need from the very beginning. So maybe breeze through the rule book, pay particular attention to the actual rule-heavy sections, and then you add the other rules and you go and reread as you go. Little problem I found, again, the rule book does a good, maybe not excellent job at explaining the game. For a rule book this thick, I wish there was a more detailed index, because the index is 1 page, and so it just covers some of the main concepts, but sometimes you want to double check, when does this thing really happen? And then I think you would need a more detailed index to be able to do so. Then you go online and you use the search function on the digital version of the rulebook, but still, I wish there had been a better index. From the point of view as a board game, the tactical aspect, I like it very much. It is basically a tactical war game with tokens that will add more narrative elements. Sometimes those are more monsters that you're fighting. And so from that point of view, I really like it. It seems reminiscent of Dungeons & Dragons board games like Wrath of Ashardalon, Castle Ravenloft, but with more detailed and frankly more interesting AIs. Those monsters really act and interact with you in interesting ways. They just have more variety. They do more things. They feel more intelligent. They're still artificial intelligence, but they really feel like there are different things that they do, and they do in more surprising, or in any case, more vivid ways than in D&D board games. Knowing the AI, you can still play around with what they're likely to do, but it's just not as easy to game the AI as it is in Castle Ravenloft, for example. I really like how interactive and dynamic the AI of the monsters feels. I like the hidden content that comes out from the various tokens, totem tokens, loot tokens. Now, there are cases in which a scenario pretty much tells you in order to win, you need to exit. And so if you want, you can just rush through, and of course you will have forever the doubt, what was in that loot token? What was under that totem? But then there are cases where you do that, and the totem was a terrifying encounter, and then next time I'm like, yeah, we're just gonna rush through the scenario. And that feels a little bit anticlimactic. In a sense, you don't have to play that anticlimactically, but the game sometimes gives you the temptation to do so. Now, again, I really like this game as a tactical combat system. However, probably the most exciting thing when I opened the game is the big adventure book. I really want to immerse myself in that in that world. And that is a world that has a verbal component that I find a little more prominent than I would like in a narrative board game. Meaning, I love games in which you have flavor text that introduce the scene and then they create part of the action verbally. They tell you what happens. And then you resolve part of the action on the board and then you go back to another text, etc., etc. But I really like some balance there. I'm playing a board game after all, so I don't want that flavor text to be too long. Now here we have some of the scenarios have 10, 12 pages of text between board-based actions. Large pages, small font, double text, double column. That's pretty much probably like 30 pages of a trade paperback novel. And I don't know how to handle that when I'm with friends. We are not trained voice actors, so I don't feel like imposing me reading 30 pages of text to someone for like 20-15 minutes, nor do they feel like doing that to me. Then we stand next to each other and we just silently read, which is not super exciting. In a sense, after a while I thought, I'm gonna play the game solo, and so then I could really take my time to read these long, detailed narratives. And even then I got a little bit tired and started skipping, and I just went to the next scenario. Is it that I don't like to read? I like really long books, but I guess when I'm playing a board game, I just don't feel like reading for half an hour before I get to the next scenario. Yes, it's very detailed. It feels like actual real prose, but I want to play the board game. And that may just be me. For some of you, that may be the most valuable thing in the design, that there is a super detailed narrative that introduces the board-based actions. Good for you. To me, it's the same reason why I can watch really long movies, but if I'm playing a video game and there's a cutscene which is more than 2-3 minutes, I start getting irritated because I'm playing a video game and I like the video game to be supported by narratives, but the main element I want to be the game. I guess my problem here is this. With multiple players, I don't know how you are gonna do it. If one of you is gonna read out loud all those long texts, you're gonna give it to players beforehand, they read it individually, I don't know. But to me, that weakened the experience overall. And so that's kind of the problem. I didn't get to enjoy the narrative as much. At the end, I went back to the fun interaction and in tactical combat and tactical discovery on the board, which to me is more than enough. You have so much content, so many things that can happen here that you're definitely going to enjoy the game, and it's going to have so much replayability, so many different things that you can do. Truly a story world you can explore, even if you don't have really the time and patience to read all of the words in the text. I think you still get a sense of a really vast, fascinating, mysterious world that you can explore, even if you pay more attention to the board-based elements than to the verbally described elements. Middara, it's a world in a box. I don't think it's gonna replace Gloomhaven in my heart. I think Gloomhaven does a slightly better job of really giving an incentive to explore this magical, mysterious world, but Middara is nevertheless an excellent game with an excellent tactical system, with a fantastic AI and a lot of fun that you can have. Some of the things that I find not so exciting, maybe you'll find exciting, but I can only share my opinions, and I hope that in doing so, I'm helping you, my viewer, to figure out whether this is a game for you or not. I liked it a lot. I don't think it's perfect, but I think still Middara is an excellent game.